You're listening to The Streaming Wars, the podcast that discusses all of the latest happenings regarding your favorite streaming services. Find out which service is winning the war this time around.
Hello everyone, welcome to the latest episode of The Streaming Wars. I'm Dustin, and with me,
Tony Hammock.
And we are here to bring you the latest episode of The Streaming Wars, which, as mentioned in the previous episode, we're going to be diving into the current state of the streaming services. And as we mentioned, we're going to be diving into Netflix first. So what can you expect from our discussion? So for the next 6 episodes, you're going to be hearing us talk about the major services that we lined out in the introduction. But just to recap, Netflix, Amazon, Apple TV Plus, Disney Plus, HBO Max, and Peacock are going to be the major services that we're going to be covering. But specifically, we're going to be giving a little bit of a history as to where these companies are coming from or how the services originated within a larger company. We're going to be talking about some of how long the service has been around, or in the case of some of these, when the service is planned to launch. We're going to be discussing some of the pricing tiers for at least the ones that we have pricing tiers for. We're also going to be discussing subscriber counts for the existing services, and we're going to kind of talk about some of the big projects that have come out of some of the services as well. So, and on top of that, we're going to be talking about all kinds of other stuff. So if, while we're actually discussing things, if there's an article that we're referencing or anything like that, and we'll specifically mention the article, but if you head over to the site, thestreamingwars.io, and you go to the specific episode, you'll find links to the actual articles that we're referencing for your guys' reference so that you can read more about it, because as this is actually obviously the two of our interpretations of the events that is taking place and our opinions and things like that. But if you want to know more about the actual news and the stock information, things like that, that stuff we'll have links to over on the site. So, Netflix. To begin with, Netflix is a company that has been around since 1997, and many of you probably are aware that Netflix did not start as a streaming service because it originated as a DVD order service, or a mail order DVD service, where the DVDs would be mailed to your house for a subscription fee. It wasn't actually until 2007 that Netflix kind of got into the streaming market, and it's actually kind of interesting because looking over the history of Netflix, they had a kind of an interesting kind of introduction into the streaming side of things. They originally had every intention to launch at a specific time frame, but then they saw how quickly YouTube or how popular YouTube was becoming, and that's actually what made them shift a lot of their focus into the market of streaming. So they've been around since 2007. So that's, at this point in time, it's been over 12 years since they've been doing the streaming side of things. And to be fair, they are the biggest one out there that has this. So currently they have over 154 million subscribers total, that and 148 paid. This is according to the Q1 2019 letter to Netflix shareholders. That was released back in April of 2019. So that is the current numbers, but as we know, it's actually gone down since then, because over the past 2 quarters, Netflix has experienced some subscribers that have kind of left. Not a ton, but currently the numbers, according to Statista, I think I'm saying that right, probably not. But their current numbers put them at 151.56 million subscribers as of Q2. So they had a little bit more paid subscribers, but overall their subscriber growth has slowed down, and that's part of the reason why they haven't looked very favorable when it comes to the stock market. So let's talk about Netflix as a company from the beginning. I mean, they're a company that's valued at over almost $26 billion. Their current stock price is sitting at somewhere in the neighborhood of 250. It's bouncing around there right now because, of course, Q3 stats are already, the Q3 reports just came out, which we'll talk about in a minute. But what do you think Netflix's strengths are at this point in time?
Netflix's strengths, I think, is how do I want to answer this question? I think the obvious answer would be original, or just content by itself. But I think what makes Netflix special is its infrastructure. They've been in this game for the longest. They understand the complexities. What they're doing, right? Because fun fact about technology: a lot of these companies, right? Facebook, Google, YouTube, right? The whole point of them is to keep using the software. So they find interesting ways to keep you on Facebook, on YouTube, even on mobile apps, right? Keep you engaged in the game. They know how many times it takes, how many failures it takes for you before you give up on the game. So you'll fail. When you get to that breaking point, though, the game will let you win. So you're staying on that app even longer. So these companies know how to do that. And what Netflix is doing is so interesting in the fact of, right, it notices the history, what you watch, the history, and it will try to find, different actors that have been throughout those different films, right? So a famous example is like Samuel L. Jackson. On Netflix, he's in, I think, 3/4 of all of Quentin Tarantino's movies. And so, right, if I watch things with Samuel L. Jackson, so then for Pulp Fiction, it's going to show me a picture of Samuel L. Jackson. If I watch a bunch of movies with Uma Thurman, then it's going to show an image of Uma Thurman on for the poster of Pulp Fiction, right? And so Netflix knows how to do that, and it's so interesting how that all works. And I think that's what separates Netflix apart from its competitors. Right now, it's facing a weird transition because a lot of their staple shows, a lot of the things that people have traditionally binge watched. Right before we were recording this podcast, I was watching The Office, which has been a staple of Netflix for the longest time. But due to these rise of these other companies that we're going to talk about, that content's kind of going away. So they're moving into a more of an original content focus, right? It started with House of Cards, but as much as, House of Cards is an amazing show, so is Orange is the New Black. It's nothing. Netflix is totally changed its business model to be all about original content. The past Emmys, Netflix took second place, and I think they had like 20-something Emmys awards for the original content stuff. So I think that what separates Netflix apart is its infrastructure and how everything is seamless. It's smooth. Netflix is everywhere. Pretty much in the past 5-6 years, you don't have many buffering problems unless like your internet's like super, super awful. But it's learned to give you high quality video on any device. There's no real buffering. Netflix is everywhere, brand recognition. I think it's the infrastructure that's what separates it apart from everyone else.
And I agree. I think the infrastructure, it does set them apart from everyone else. Obviously, the other thing that probably sets them apart from everybody else is that they have had such a large jump on everybody else. They were the ones who kind of set the bar for what streaming could be and how it could be successful. And they made a lot of money, and a lot of companies took notice because of their success. And you see a lot of companies kind of reactionarily launching their own services for the reason of Netflix being successful and making as much money as they have. You can honestly say, so the idea of a subscriber service has been around for a long time. This is not anything new by any means. To a degree, you have cable services, which is a subscriber service. And there are a lot of companies who have been in the midst of being there to, being a cable provider for years, for a good chunk of time. Warner Brothers was attached to Time Warner, which had Time Warner Cable. You also had, obviously, Comcast now owns NBC Universal. You have AT&T, currently a cable provider who owns Warner Brothers. But over the course of time, a lot of the cable providers, they're the companies that are making a lot of money. They have a lot of money coming in because they have basically a large group of people who are paying every single month for something. And if the infrastructure is in place, a lot of the money that you're making can go towards whatever you want. I mean, Comcast is a humongous company, and they were able to purchase NBC Universal and all that is entailed with that, and then in turn can use the money towards buying or purchasing something else and just making the company bigger. But the idea is, by having a service that you have, that someone has to have or wants to have on a normal basis, and I'm not talking about a utility, I'm talking about like a want. For example, while I'd say probably like the vast majority of Americans have a cell phone, the reality is it is a luxury. You are not necessarily required to have a cell phone by any mean. You're not going to die. It's not like heat or electricity or anything like that you need to have in order to survive. So that being said, a cell phone service or a cable service is considered a luxury, and it should be considered a luxury. But the point is, those are luxury items that you're paying for, and a company is making a ton of money on that stuff. And if you just look at some of the biggest companies that are around that own as much as they own, a lot of them have something to do with some sort of subscriber-based system. Whether it be a cell phone company, there's lots of cell phone companies the cell phone companies that exist, they have a lot of money because they have a lot of customers. And they slowly, will absorb other companies. And this goes back to even before cell phones or even cable TV, you had telephone companies, and telephone companies just became larger and larger and larger because that's the way it was. And even to this day, while there are monopoly laws in place and things like that, there are still certain areas where you can only get a specific cable provider. You don't have a choice of a number of cable providers. If you want good cable options and you want good internet, you're going to go with a specific cable provider that offers that. So the thing is, the point of me saying all of this is subscriber-based systems have been around for a very long period of time. And companies rely on having a steady income that is consistent, and the only way to have a steady income is to have something that for a fact there's a large amount of people that are going to be paying you every single month the same amount of money. And that's how a lot of these cell phone companies and cable providers and things like that, these companies, that's how they make so much money, and they can do what they want to do with the money that they have and grow as large as they are because they have a steady source of revenue every single month. So when you go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say to those who don't really, right? So we talked about subscriber bases and why, how does that translate? So we're talking about Netflix and tech companies. How does that translate to the normal day of life? I kind of view it as insurance, right? Health insurance.
Yep.
You got, your deductible, and then you also got your premiums. Premiums happen, every month, no matter what you want to do, you still have to pay it. Where your deductible is, you basically pay it upfront costs. So insurance, you can choose your insurance plan based on, all right, do I want to pay more upfront with a lower premium, or do I want to have a lower deductible with a higher premium? And so that's kind of a way to talk about with like an insurance type terminology. But even, all right, let's go back into tech, but let's go back a couple years. When Microsoft was the biggest thing ever, they sold all of like Microsoft Office in terms of licenses. So you paid, my dad was he worked as a technology provider for a big company. So he bought, Microsoft Office licenses that cost, $300 a pop up front, but he never paid that license again. So Microsoft was just only getting lump sum costs. And it's great and it's good, but you have to you have to keep coming out with new products. You have to keep putting out more sales. You have to keep doing more. With the subscribers, once you get somebody hooked, it's easy money. For Netflix, it's like you're not having a new person out there trying to sell you something new every single time. Like Apple for iPhones, every summer they have to come out with a new iPhone to convince you to go buy a new one. Or Netflix, all it just does is it keeps going. You pay the same amount. Let's just, I know you're going to talk about prices in a little bit, but let's just assume very basic. You pay $10 a month. All right, that's simple, Another thing that these subscriber-based companies have figured out is, when you do a subscription, right, a $10, $15 subscription doesn't seem that much in your monthly budget. So you're not going to cut it, I don't want to spend $300, doing something crazy, but $10 a month on, streaming. All right, that's good. And there's a lot that people also forget to cancel. Because you might end up having like 4 or 5 streaming services between video and then music. You're spending, as much as you would have done for cable and then for a bunch of iTunes music or DVDs. So it's an interesting business model because it's so simple, and it's surprising that nobody really has done it in terms of tech. And it's simple. You make a lot of money. It's just interesting when you study Netflix and how they were one of the first companies in this new Web 2.0 world of forcing subscriptions, and now everybody's doing subscriptions. I mean, it's just, we're talking about the streaming wars. Everyone wants subscriptions because it's simple, easy money.
Exactly. And that's the thing. I mean, ultimately it comes down to what can you what can you offer to a subscriber or to a consumer that you will convince them to pay you a specific amount every single month as a luxury. And that's what all these services are. All of the services that we're going to talk about here on the show are all luxuries. What can these services convince you to do to make sure, or what can they offer to you to ensure that you pay them every single month? Now, obviously, there's plenty of people who will, they'll pay for a month for a service, or they'll use the free month and they'll binge a bunch of shows that they want to see or something like that. But that's not the majority of the people, because there's a lot of subscribers. As I said, there's like 150 million subscribers worldwide, and Netflix has a lot of money, and they spend an insane amount of money on their content. But all of this goes back to the strengths. The strengths of the company at this point in time is that they have such a lead on all of the other companies that are coming. While a lot of the other companies that are coming are part of larger media companies like Disney and Warner Brothers and NBC Universal, there's these companies that are coming. Netflix had a really long head start, and while the other companies will be able to offer a lot of really unique things, Netflix will be probably still at the top as far as subscriber rates for a little while at least, because it's going to take some time for these other services to convince people that, hey, you should come over here and you should pay for this one instead of that one, or hey, you should come and pay for this one in addition to that one that you already like. Netflix is established, and that's a big thing when it comes to consumers spending their money. Who is established, who's been around? If you go to the store and you're looking for something specific and some specific brand of something and you can't find it, are you going to buy the generic one, or are you going to buy a different brand if they don't have the exact one that you have? Some people will. Some people have no problem with that. Some people go for the less expensive option. But some people want the premium option that they are fully aware that they know tastes good. If you go to a restaurant, do you go to the same restaurant all the time? Do you get the same meals because you know that you like that restaurant, that you know that they prepare their stuff very well? Or do you go and try different things? Or do you go someplace that's a little less expensive? It's all about the idea of what best suits you. But Netflix has proven for a long period of time that they have this idea of what kind of content will draw people in. They've had a lot of shows that they've produced over the years, and out of all the shows that they've produced, there's a lot of shows that obviously were around and have ended and are no longer around, but they keep coming up with other shows to watch. The other thing to keep in mind that is something that should be brought up because of the time situation that they have had so much time is they've had so many subscribers watching shows on their service that they have a very, very good, basically built-in market research of what shows are successful on their service and what shows they should reach out to try to, get creators to make. And that helps a lot. I mean, obviously for a service like Disney Plus, they're going to be having shows based off of properties that are already successful in movies and other mediums and things like that with Star Wars and Marvel and Pixar. But there's at the same time, there's a lot of unknowns. Outside of a few shows, what else will they offer? Netflix, if you're already a Netflix subscriber, you know what they have to offer. You're either content with what they have, or you are, looking for something else anyway. So then the other part of this is, so obviously we talked about the strengths. Now the question is, what kind of situations should we be worried about when it comes to Netflix? Because the thing is, with Netflix, even though it's been around as long as it has, even though it has as many subscribers, there's a couple of slight small things you have to keep in mind when you're looking at the overall strength of the business, and what the longevity of it. And the one thing, this is the point in time where I want to bring up the pricing. So like over the years, the pricing for Netflix has changed drastically. Where at this point, if you're wanting to use more than one screen, you're looking for the highest quality picture, and you're looking for the ability, like I said, to watch on multiple screens, then you're going to be paying $16 a month. Netflix currently offers 3 different tiers. A basic, which is basically you're going to see everything in a standard definition. You're only going to be able to watch one screen at a time, and that basic is priced at $8.99 per month. Now, that is up from years and years ago. $7.99 is what it's been in the past, but some of the services and tiers have subscribed over time as well. So back in 2017, the basic service was just $7.99, so $1 less. But when you get up to the premium services, these are the ones that have jumped up. So the standard tier, you do get HD quality shows when available, but you also get to watch on 2 different screens at once. That's priced currently at $12.99. That jumped up $2 from back in 2017, which used to be $10.99. And then you go to the premium option, which is you can watch up to 4 screens at once. You have Ultra HD, which is the equivalent of, or very close to 4K. They won't say it's 4K because there's issues with streaming, or internet providers actually streaming 4K, but that one is $15.99, and that previously in 2017 was $13.99. So that those top 2 tiers jumped up $2 in just the past 2 years. And the thing is, the pricing is a concern, of course, when you look at some of the services that are coming. Obviously, we don't know the pricing structure for all of the services that are coming. We do know Apple TV Plus and Disney Plus. And Disney has very, very highly, that you can tell that Disney is marketing theirs towards people who are interested in Netflix and have Netflix. Outside of the fact that Disney is going to be cheaper, Disney's offering more screens that you can watch at the same time, and everything will be available in Ultra HD. So they're already going for basically the throat of Netflix by saying, well, we're going to offer everything that you offer on the premium plus more, and we're going to be less than half the price. So that's interesting, and that's a downfall when it comes to Netflix. Will we see anything in the future of Netflix changing their prices?
Yes, but not for, I think this is an unpopular opinion. I think yes. Apple TV is stupidly low in terms of pricing. I think Disney is lower, but like acceptable. Like it makes sense, but it's still lowballing the market. Netflix's prices were the norm. Now they're, a little bit higher. It's going to make you think about going maybe to Disney Plus or Apple TV or somebody else is cheaper. But if Netflix is spending a whole lot of money.
It's over $5 billion a year.
Yeah, on original content. And, if you do, if you look at the reports and earnings, they're not, it's debt. It's not like they're making that much money to pay for it beforehand. So they're taking out loans and stuff like that. So for this whole transition from, having people watch The Office, binging on that, binging on Friends, binging on, all these different shows to original content, they're spending crap ton of money on this. And when I look at the budgets, when I see things, it doesn't make sense how Netflix is going to have a viable business in the future if they keep spending records amount of money on original content. Like something's got to give. I think that's kind of why the price increase last time was because they were pushing even more original content. Right. It's okay. Like Netflix has won a lot of Emmys just because they have a lot of low budget movies that have good acting. It's interesting how the lower budget of the movie, usually the better the acting and the writing. It's kind of a weird coincidence. Interesting.
It's almost as if they are
like
taking risks, and the risks just happen to pay off, but the monetary risk isn't as high.
Well, it's a lower risk for a lot of their content. It's a low risk. Pumping out low risk content that is good, and according to the algorithms, it's what people like. What concerns me is their push to have some content like maybe an HBO or an Amazon Prime in terms of high budget movies and high budget TV shows. I think the best example, I think two really good examples are Bright with Will Smith, and the other one was whichever one was with Ben Affleck. I didn't watch it.
Triple Frontier.
Triple Frontier. I knew it had something with the Frontier in it.
Yeah.
Triple Frontier.
They made a big deal about how many people watched that. They bragged at the time that there was 55 million different people or households that had watched that movie from the day that it launched for the first month. Which, if you translated that into a box office price, it would have been an insane amount of money, but obviously you're going to watch it because you're already subscribed. It's not actually taking the risk of going to the movie theater, but that is an insane amount of households, because you have to average like 2.5 people per household, and you do the rates of that. You're talking like 125 million people watched that movie. That's an insane number, because then if you put that into like a $10 ticket, we're talking almost $1 billion. If it was actually in the box office, or if it was in theaters.
Yeah, but I mean, like, these movies were, over $100 million budget. Netflix, I mean, most of their content isn't over $100 million.
Exactly.
In terms of their shows, even like Netflix or House of Cards, like, those were high quality, TV shows, great content, great cinematography, great acting, and there's no way that was over $100 million. But yeah, if you're gonna try to compete with the big dogs and have over $100 million, $150 million, I think Bright was like $200 million. It was ridiculous. Type of budget. There's no way that's sustainable for the future, and that's what concerns me about Netflix is the strive for greatness and the strive to be the best. At what cost is it? They can't. You can only do so many things at one time, right? They're trying to. Netflix is basically. Is grown as much as it can in the U.S. It's reaching that point in Europe. Where it doesn't have a good stronghold is in China, but even less so in India. And if it can get itself into those two markets, then that's when you can see even more growth in terms of Netflix's, stock price, share price, and everything like that. So like right now, yeah, Netflix is doing great, but there's no room to go forward in America. But they're trying to get into Asia. So you're having a lot more movies that are set in China that have, Chinese actors, shows that, the South Korean movie market, South Korean actors and directors. India, there's a lot more, I'm from the U.S., so it's not like I would really know about, Bollywood that much. I know enough to barely have a conversation about it. But Netflix has been hiring, Bollywood directors and actors and making Bollywood content for India. And that's like a booming area. So, it's Netflix is trying to do so many different things of trying to reach out in new markets. You need to create new content, even if it's low budget, new content for, to kickstart, their service in India, kickstart their service in Asia, in Africa, and even more so in South America. So Netflix is spending all that money that way, hopefully in the future gaining that back. But then also here is you're losing, classic bingeable content, so they have to spend even more. And to basically answer your question, Dustin, I think they will. I think they will have to increase the prices either here or internationally. There's just, if you look at the math, there's just no way to do it besides them going crazy in debt, and then it's not going to be a good business because, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it ultimately just comes down to they cannot keep spending as much money as they are. While you think about it, 150 million people, you have to look at this from a different perspective. 150 million subscribers paying on average $10 a month. That's $1.5 billion that they're bringing in every single month. So if they spend $5 billion on original programming per year, that's only about half of it's less than half of everything that they're bringing in. Now, obviously, there's infrastructure costs and things like that that are not part of that original programming cost. On top of the fact that there's other stuff that they're probably developing, and keep in mind, $5 billion is just for the original programming. That's not for the licensing stuff. Like, the whole reason Office and Friends were on Netflix in the first place was because they were paying the companies that owned them licensing fees. And as we know, those things can be crazy expensive. There was a big deal last year that Friends was going to be leaving at the end of 2018, and then Netflix basically bit the bullet and said, no, it's not. And they went to Warner Brothers and convinced Warner Brothers to let them keep Friends for an additional year for $100 million. And when you think about that, I'm sure The Office is up there in cost, and obviously those are going. But now we just heard Seinfeld is coming to it's coming to Netflix. So I'm sure that they paid a ton of money for Seinfeld. And when you start thinking about it, and you look at all the other shows they have a massive deal with CW, where a lot of the shows from the CW are popping on Netflix very, very soon after the season's wrap. There's other shows that are popping up from AMC. There's a lot of things that Netflix is paying for outside of the original programming. So while they're spending $5 million on original programming, they could be spending maybe another $5 billion on just the back catalog of stuff that's the older shows, the current shows that are airing on broadcast that they're looking for, a place to air elsewhere because they're not part of a service or, that's already existing out there. So they spend a massive amount of money. But the reality is, even though they're valued at $25 billion, that doesn't actually mean they're ultimately worth that much, because we all know how the stock market works. Just because something's valued at it doesn't mean it's actually worth that. That's just what the value is based off the stock price. But as we've seen with Netflix over the past couple of years, that is a very fluctuating system. And I guess this will be the time we'll talk about stock price. So basically, going back to where they were years and years ago, back when they launched streaming, their stock was only about $3 a share. Now you jump forward to, let's say, 2011. This is about 4 years after they started. Their stock price had gone up to $38 per share. But then they clearly started spending money because, as we know, House of Cards was their first original show, and that show premiered in 2013. So you can tell that they started ramping up for streaming, and their stock price kind of went really, really far down to somewhere in 2012. It was down to like $7 at different points. But then as they started releasing more shows, 2013, House of Cards, 2014 was the first Marvel show, and some other original shows that they had, the stock price had gone all the way up to $62. So 9 times the price of it was just basically 2 years prior to that. So then it steadily went up. It's had a couple of downs. In 2015, it was up to $123 a share. So we're talking within 5 years, basically, they went up basically 120 times the amount that they were before, or roughly about 100 times more than they were before. It's pretty crazy. That math is way off. I don't know why I said that, but anyway, they went down a little bit at the beginning of 2016, but then they steadily kept rising, and then in 2018 they hit their peak of $411.09, and this was this was basically in the middle of 2018 last year, but then it's all started to go downhill from there. As more services has started to get announced, the stock went from $411 down to $268. And then over the past 12 months, it's steadily rose up to its high of $380 in July. But that was right before the Q2 results came out. And when those came out, the stock price dipped again. And now Q3 has come out, and the stock price is dipping yet again. So the reality of it is, it just comes down to the last year. they have had a situation. So there's an article that we were reading from CNBC. Basically, the headline is Netflix goes negative for the year, giving up a 46% gain. So since the beginning of 2019, Netflix actually gained 46% of their stock price prior, to before. And now after Q3 results, their stock has actually gone back down, where they're now going down lower than they were prior to the beginning of 2019. So, and clearly this has a lot to do with a lot of the streaming services that are coming, and it has a lot to do with a lot of news coming out regarding a lot of the shows that are coming away, that are being taken away from the actual series itself. So it's an interesting situation where they're in a position where, while they have a ton of money coming in, they're also spending a ton of money. And the reality is they're going to have to keep spending money in order to keep the subscribers, because the new services that are going to be coming out are going to be, flashing lights and saying, "Hey, look what we've got." And in some cases, are going to have lower prices, and they're going to take some of those subscribers away from Netflix in general. And if the subscriber rate actually goes down, because right now the stock price is is going down specifically because the growth isn't happening as much as they projected, and that's the biggest reason as to why the stock is going down.
This is a very bleak overview of Netflix's financials. I kind of view it like Social Security. It's paying out more than it's bringing in, and we're all expecting those checks to keep coming, but one day it's going to run out of money, and that's doomsday, and we put it off. So I feel like a couple years ago, if I had Netflix stock, man, I'd be rich right now. But then now I'm just hesitant, just knowing that there's more players into the market. Growth isn't sustainable. There's no way that it can keep going the way it is. And yeah, that's why people float different hypotheticals of, what if Disney buys Netflix? Well, that's going to be interesting. What if Apple buys Netflix? Apple could buy anyone because they have a crap ton of money. So you bring about all those different scenarios, and we are going to touch about this later for different streaming services, and then probably an argument based on the state of how everything is. But Netflix is a company into itself. It's a tech company that streams video, then also rents DVDs out. And I know that's redundant, but I'm bringing it up in comparison to, Apple's streaming service is based on, it's got the backing of Apple, the company, and for the longest time, they've had the biggest cash reserve out of any company in the world. You have Amazon Prime Video, which has the backing of Amazon, which, there's basically 4 different smaller companies that make up Amazon. It's a very diversified business, so that they can take risks in video and they're fine financially. Disney, we kind of think it's all about, movies, because Marvel's made billions of dollars recently. Pixar movies, Star Wars. But they've also a very diversified business as well, so they can take on more of that risk. What I'm trying to say is that, and then you got, Warner Brothers, which is owned by AT&T, which is an ISP. You have NBC, which is owned by Comcast, which is another ISP, internet service provider, if you don't know what ISP means. So big companies that are backing these media companies and these streaming services. And so they could take more risk. They're more financially, safe. Netflix, not so much. It's just Netflix. They have no backing. They have no one else to run to. And that's why I'm worried about the business model. If it was, Warner Brothers, spending a whole bunch of money on content, I'd be fine, because they're going to eat the lost, they're going to make up the cost eventually. Netflix, it's an escalating problem that's just the more you spend, the bigger the problem is, but you're putting it off to later. So that's kind of how I view Netflix. That's what I'm worried about. Also kind of did a rant on 5 different things that we're going to talk about in the future. But yeah.
I mean, it comes down to, there's a lot to talk about when it comes to these companies. And once we actually get through just covering the major services as a whole, we'll be discussing, the companies, versing each other, this company versus this company, what's going to happen. And the other obvious situation that we have is we don't have price points for some of the services that are coming out. And we also don't know the complete details for all the companies that are releasing services, as far as what are they going to be offering within the price. Or are they going to have tiers? Peacock, the NBC Universal's service, it has stated recently in an interview that they're going to have an ad model where you can just watch it and just be able to watch their original content using an ad system, which is different than a lot of these other ones because the other ones aren't using ads in their services at this point. So it'll be interesting to see how everything works out as time progresses, which obviously brings us to why we're covering this stuff long term. So I think that's kind of a real good thing, a good place to stop with Netflix. Obviously, there's definitely more that we can discuss about Netflix in the future. There's no shortage of things to discuss. But I think for now, that should give you a really good overview of where Netflix is as a company right now. Real quick before we end, I was just running through. If you're really interested in seeing how much original content they've actually produced, there's probably way more than you actually think there is. If you type in Netflix Originals, which the link will be over on the site for you to check out, Netflix Originals, on Wikipedia, there's a huge list of every show that has ever been a Netflix original, including the stuff that they co-produce with other companies like BBC and some of the other projects that they have on top of the stuff that they co-finance when it comes to movies and things like that. So definitely something to take a look at, because there's a lot of stuff that I don't think a lot of people even understand or comprehend, that some of these shows that you've been watching are Netflix originals. You just didn't know they were. So we'll have the link over on the site for that. It's also really interesting because as you're scrolling through the list, the list is on Wikipedia is set up where it shows when the show is premiered and it's separated by genres. And when you look, there's not a lot of shows that last for very long. I'm looking through and you're seeing I'm seeing a lot of shows that don't make it past 3 or 4 seasons. There's a lot of shows that don't make it past 1 season, but the shows that even are successful don't really make it past 4 or 5 episodes or 4 or 5 seasons. So that's an interesting thing to keep in mind too. But definitely check out the list, because it's really interesting to see all of the stuff that they are actually producing and how many shows that they have produced that they've canceled or not renewed. So definitely check out that list. But the one thing I kind of want to leave each one of these services on is whether or not they're already existing or whether or not they're coming in the future. I want to talk about either, to kind of end the episode, I want to talk about either something you've seen on the service that you really, really, really enjoyed that you like to suggest to somebody, or something that you are looking forward to in the immediate future that you know is coming. This would obviously apply a lot more for the services that have yet to launch. But out of those two, what would be something from Netflix that you think that if anybody was going to start with Netflix, what series would you suggest they check out?
Oh, so much. No, disclaimer, I'm probably going to drop Netflix in the future. The original content that I see coming, it just doesn't interest me. I'm going to spend my money elsewhere. So, obviously, I'm going to look backwards. House of Cards seasons 1 and 2. Really, season 1 is some great television. Just great writing. There's so many times watching season 1 where my mouth was just dropped, because I'm like, how in the world is this possible? How this guy basically just said F you to everybody and was, going to conquer the presidency. Like, that's just crazy. What a crazy premise. But, man, just such good TV. Yeah, Kevin Spacey. That's just ridiculous. But besides that, I love superheroes. I help contribute with Destin on BatmanUniverse.net. So I love me some superheroes. Daredevil seasons 1 and 3, just amazing television, amazing cinematography, amazing fight choreography, very real for a television show. It has movie level choreography, and it's not cheesy either. It's realistic. It's gritty. It's like, people are actually going to fight. Yeah, it's got martial arts, but it's like real. It's not, your 80s kung fu movie, which it can be a little bit silly at times. It's just great. And there's always in one episode per seasons. There's 3 seasons, but always once a season they have like this like hallway-ish one-shot fight choreography scene, a one take scene, and man, it's just some good television. So I can go on and on, but yeah, seasons 1 and 3, amazing television.
So I agree with House of Cards. House of Cards, at least the first 2 seasons were really, really good. I think the last 2 seasons were very, very weak because I think it just lasted longer than it needed to. It's one of those situations where they didn't know when to stop, unfortunately. But some other shows out there, like I'm real into thrillers and crime dramas and things like that. The original Narcos, I haven't watched Narcos Mexico. I've heard great things, but it's on my list to watch. I just haven't watched it yet. But the original Narcos, I really enjoyed that. I love me some Stranger Things. It's not exactly the best TV in the world, but it's great, nostalgic, and I find it really interesting. But one of the shows that I really, really enjoyed are the crime dramas again are Mindhunter and Ozark. Ozark probably is one of my favorite shows that I've seen in a long time, because it's...
What's Ozark about?
So the premise with Ozark is that it's basically there's a financial person who's a partner in a financial firm. They have a lot of money coming in, and he's managing money. And the first episode, he basically finds out that a lot of the money that they're working with is cartel money. And they have been laundering money for the cartel for a long time. And the cartel comes to them because the other partner in the business has been actually stealing from the cartel. He's been keeping more money than he's supposed to. So they kill the partner, and they basically tell the other partner, you're the money man, you're the man with the plan, you go launder our money. So he basically has to pack up his family from Chicago and move. They move to the Ozarks in Missouri to basically figure out a new way of laundering money. And the premise of the show is basically like he's, working with the cartel, but he's on this edge and the fence of whether or not he doesn't want to do this. He never knew he was working with the cartel in the first place, but now he's in a situation where he has no choice. So he's trying to protect his family. At the same time, he's working for the cartel, and then there's some stuff that he gets into while he's in the Ozarks with the locals. And it's a really interesting thing about what money can do to people, but how it's not just money that has a hold on people. There's other things that have a hold on people, like family, like drugs and addictions and other things like that. It's a really good series that I would strongly suggest to anybody out there who's interested in crime dramas. And it paints Jason Bateman, who's the main character of the show, in a very different picture than you'd probably be used to, because he's commonly associated with a lot of comedies, but he's really good in it, and Laura Linney's in it as well. So definitely check that out. Mindhunter is another crime drama, and it basically is the story of the original profilers within the FBI figuring out how to come up with a system to profile murderers, that we hear about so much. If you remember, in the late 90s and early 2000s, there was different shows on TV, Criminal Minds, The Profiler. These were all shows that had to do with people, the FBI working with, local law enforcement and things like that to try to figure out who the criminal would be, to get a good idea of who they could be based off of their personality and things like that. And the show Mindhunter is basically set in the late 70s and then early 80s, with the second season, where basically they're coming up with the system of how to profile these people by going through and interviewing serial killers that they have in custody. So it's a really interesting show. There's not a lot of action, so if you're looking for action, it's not an action type show. There is action that happens, but it's very much kind of like your down to earth, nitty gritty as far as the details stuff, but not a lot of action. Ozark has its fair share of action, so I'd strongly suggest those 2 shows.
The one defining, I guess, when we're going through the series and what defines these streaming companies, I think the one unique thing that defines Netflix is that all the episodes of a television series drop at the same time. So, like for Daredevil, season 1, all 13 episodes were released at the same time. In comparison to all the different platforms that we know about, Netflix is the only one that gives you all the content at once. And that's interesting. I mean, in the future, we could discuss the merits of that. But if you want a unique identifier
Amazon does that
between
too.
all, they do. I thought it was. I thought they came out weekly.
No, Amazon.
I don't do Amazon. So I don't know.
Amazon releases their stuff in the same model sense that Netflix does as well. They have this weird thing where sometimes they break up the seasons, where they'll release like part 1 of a season and then they'll release part 2 like 6 months later. But then they have a bunch of their own issues, which we'll talk about the next episode, because Amazon is the company we're going to be focusing on the next time. But yes, Netflix is the originator of binge TV, binging shows. I mean, while Hulu obviously existed and you could binge watch shows, it's not to the same level because you'd still have to wait for the shows to all release before you could actually watch them, while Netflix does drop all the episodes at once. And like you said, a lot of the other services that are coming, they're all stating that that's not their plan. They're not planning on going with that model, which, to be fair, is a smart business model to go with by releasing your stuff every week instead of dropping it all at once, because it keeps the people who are watching the stuff. And while I personally like the idea of being able to watch everything at once, I can completely understand from a business model, it makes way more sense to not release everything at once and let somebody come in, get a free trial, watch all of the episodes that they want to watch, and then leave before the free trial is up. There's no money incentive in it, and that's the kind of stuff and risks you see with startup companies. And obviously Netflix is not a startup anymore. They've been around for a long time, but I honestly feel like that could change in the future too.
Yeah, it's also probably healthier for the human body. I mean, I remember a lot of times in grad school, when different shows I wanted to watch came out, I might have stayed up the whole entire night watching a 13-episode season of a TV show, which isn't the most healthy thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just the one thing that Netflix is just unique for me, is you get all the episodes of a TV series at the same time. So it's very interesting.
All right, so with that, we're going to wrap up this episode. As I mentioned, next episode we're going to be talking about Amazon Prime Video, specifically everything that entails like what we talked about here, but with Amazon Prime. So that's what you can look forward to in the next episode. As always, you can head over to the site, thestreamingwars.io, for all the articles that we referenced here on this episode. Those will be in the show notes on the episode post over on the site. In addition to that, you'll find our social media links to Twitter and Instagram over on there as well. In addition to that, we have a Patreon. If you are interested in the content that we are producing, we are always happy to continue to provide more content. But if you can spare $1 or $5 or $10, we do have special rewards specifically for you, as a thank you for supporting us. So I greatly appreciate if you could take a look at that. In addition to that, we have launched a Discord server. The link is over on the site as well. And if you are a Patreon supporter, you do get recognized over on the server. But we're going to be, Tony and I will be active on the server, and we'll be discussing things and bringing up news articles as we see them and things like that. So it'll be more of like a day-to-day, here's what's happening today, since the episodes aren't obviously releasing daily or in some cases weekly. So definitely check out the Discord server in addition to the website and our social media accounts. So with that being said, for Tony and I, thank you for listening, and we will see you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to The Streaming Wars. Check us out on Twitter and Instagram. Also consider supporting us on Patreon. Links can be found at thestreamingwars.io.